Hello everybody, welcome back to our channel. I am back in the US in Philly. For those of you that have been keeping up to date with my channel, I was in Namibia for about 4 weeks actually, or slightly over 4 weeks. It was a wonderful experience. I encourage you to watch my vlogs. To be quite honest, I expected to do a lot of Namibian content, but I went to Namibia and I feel like I was just living so much in the moment that I didn't pick up the camera. So what I uploaded is what I could do. It wasn't really because I didn't want to pick up the camera. It was just more of I'll just be living and experiencing stuff and forget that I'm a YouTuber. But I hope you enjoy the ones that I've put out there. But I really had a great time, and now we're back to business. Today's video, we are kind of diving into actuarial stuff, but also just give an update. I know that this channel is a lot of lifestyle, and a big part of my lifestyle is my career and my education, but also just sharing certain parts about that, and also giving information and insight on my experiences in that journey. But yeah, thank you guys for coming. Happy New Year as well. I talked about recently, maybe in the recent 4 videos. One of them, I talked about writing my first fellowship exam. I talked about how that experience was a little bit, but I wanted to dive deeper into that, share my experience with that exam. I'm gonna start off by just like what this exam is about. First of all, for those of you that are not familiar with the actuarial science journey, so we take a lot of professional exams, can take years to get your credentials as a fully qualified actuary. And the first few exams, I'll say around 7, are for you to get your associateship/designation. And after that, if you want to study further, you can choose a track or a specification in terms of like which industry you want to be a part of, or just I would say like it's kind of like specializing basically to get your fellowship. And so I decided to go into a track of corporate finance and enterprise risk management, because I think corporate finance in general, risk management is stuff that it really interests me, but it's also stuff that are very applicable to various industries, applicable in very different situations. But I think overall the biggest driver for me to follow this path is because it's content that genuinely interests me, knowing about businesses, what influences their decisions, and ways of just increasing your probabilities of being successful when it comes to a business. But yeah, so that's the track that I chose, and I took my first fellowship exam. There are 3 in total, and generally they are really challenging exams. All actuarial exams are challenging, but particularly fellowship exams are like really challenging. The pass rates are very low, but also just it requires more dedication, you know. So last November I took my first one, and I'll start off by saying it was a really hard experience. First of all, I started studying around the time I started my new role, and obviously trying to adjust to a new role, new team, everything, and starting this exam. I started studying for this huge exam, and also people keep talking about how they are such a different ball game, and that kind of like invoke emotions of anxiety. That am I doing something right? Am I not doing it right? Is the way I'm going wrong? Because a lot of people also suggested changing up your studying strategy from how you studied for the other exams, just because it's like different. My studying resources, I was using TIA, the Infinite Actuary. I believe this was the recommended resource for this particular exam Enterprise Risk Management. That's the exam. And I started studying. The material was a lot. At first I was kind of taking a little bit slow, but also making sure I'm putting in the hours. And then I started feeling most of the pressure, I'll say maybe the last 7 weeks. I literally remember for the first time. I'm not a coffee place, like cafe type of person, and I was going to cafes to study. I was drinking lattes. Guys, I don't drink coffee, but it was just a point in my life where I feel like I needed the energy and focus, and I was actually like, I felt like I was fixated on this one thing. And to be honest, I remember kind of also feeling a little bit of depression. Not like depression, but like I was really anxious, like I was doubting myself. Can I really do this? This seems so hard, you know. But yeah, I continued to push, and I just continued to study, and I continued to like do what I could. And then I think few weeks to the exam, I really started also cramming flashcards. The flashcards were, I think, 700 and something, and so it was kind of a strategy to tie everything together after going through the studying material. The studying material is the study manual and the videos. That's what I used. And then going through the flashcards to tie everything together. I will say that one thing or one advice that I've got, and maybe this has also helped me a lot, is not neglecting your study manual. I feel like for most of us who have used coaching actuaries for pre-ASA exams, we're very used to using videos as our learning materials. But for fellowship exams, there can be a lot of nuances that could be left out in videos that are important to know. So highly suggesting focusing on the study manual and making sure you are taking in all the information that you are reading. I know it seems like it's a lot, but it's important to go through the study manual and using the videos and flashcards just to summarize. So that's my experience, and that's what I've also been advised by people who have taken this exam. And so yeah, I studied, I will say on average I try to study 3 hours per day and try to dedicate more time during weekends. But I'll also say that I wasn't really consistent with those hours. Some days I'll put in more, some days I'll put in less. There were even honestly some days where I just couldn't study. Like my mind was just shut down, and I feel like in that instance I just give myself the space and breathing room and give my best the following day. One thing I will also recommend with the flashcards is using those moments where, for example, the thing that I used was every time I'll go to work, I will be using my phone to do flashcards. This sounds weird, but every time I'm on a bus or like in a car or I'm just somewhere waiting for something or for an appointment, I'll be reading my flashcards or like going through my flashcards. And I think the flashcards were very useful in tying things together, because there were times in my studying material where I felt like some things didn't make sense, or it was very hard for me to connect concepts to other concepts, or how that falls into a specific theme. So in order to do that, I found the flashcards helpful in tying those things together, even though I saved the flashcards last minute. I also know myself that I'm a short-term memory person. Like if you ask me stuff I've learned 6 weeks ago and I was just like trying to memorize those things, I wouldn't remember. So because I have such a short-term memory when it comes to memorizing, that's why my preferred form of studying is understanding. Like if I'm learning, I want to understand the stuff instead of trying to memorize, because memorization for me doesn't work. So the reason why I left flashcards kind of like last minute I mean like 4 weeks to the exam, was to help with that. I also know that I was really cramming hard in terms of just going through the flashcards as fast as I can, but also making sure that I'm going back to those that I've struggled with. So I don't recommend this. Everyone's studying strategy is different. If you think that will work for you, that's fine. But in this particular exam, one thing I'll probably do different is I'll try to start around 6 weeks, just because I felt so much pressure doing that in 4 weeks span, including other things that I had left for last minute. But yeah, anyways, let's get to the exam day. The exam day, I felt very different in a sense that normally when I'm about to take an exam, I'm very anxious. I'm, I'm trying to maximize my chances of passing and just thinking and praying to God that I pass. But with this particular exam, I remember going into the exam room. I went through security check and everything, and I remember feeling a calm, peaceful moment. Not because I was confident in what I knew. In fact, I felt like I didn't know anything. I felt like I didn't know enough going into this exam. But I felt like a sense of calm and peace because I feel like I reached a point where I was like, I did what I could, and like I didn't have expectations for the exam. I was just like, I'm gonna try my best. Me being here is an achievement on its own. Like writing my first fellowship exam, I didn't even think this far when it came to my career. So me being there in that moment was like being grateful for this moment and being able to take this exam at this point in time. I was just very proud of myself, and I told myself whatever the results, I'm okay. And I was genuinely enjoying stuff that I'm learning in the track as well. So whatever the results, I was really okay. But I remember feeling something different that I haven't felt before in my other exams that I have taken. I went in the exam. I remember seeing the first few questions, and I was happy because the first few questions, I remember studying that particular topic the night before. Guys, when they say you can't really do much in a day or two, I feel like sometimes there's just this grace. Maybe it's favor when you pray to God, like, show me what I need to study. And this wasn't even a topic that I felt like it was going to be in the exam because it was kind of a niche topic. The reason why I studied is because somebody was like, yeah, because I was asking, do you think they'll bring in these things? Because I felt like it's such a niche topic, but also I don't really understand it deeply. And if it's something that's important in the track, I probably need to study it. And they were like, yeah, this is something that's very important in this track and you need to know these concepts. And like I studied, I went through this. It was kind of like crazy because it's not like that I studied a lot about this particular concept, but I tried to understand what was in the study manual at the time. And so I remember the first couple of questions in the exam were exactly the stuff that I studied the night before. And how fellowship exams are, this is the trick. It's not an exam where they ask you define these, list these. They might maybe, but those are very rare. The questions are you get a problem or they have case studies, and then they expect you to apply those concepts. So that's why reading with understanding is important. I know, especially like in this track, the corporate finance track, reading with understanding is important because you need to know when you see this business problem or when you see this context, what are you expected to apply. And they also expect you kind of to make decisions. If you were to choose between two strategies, which one would you choose? And then you have to elaborate yourself or illustrate or evaluate different methodologies. So it's all of that. It's like applying what you have learned. And so if you don't understand the concept or you don't understand the topic, it'll be very hard to apply, even if you studied what the concept is. So I will emphasize that part, understanding. Anyways, and then down the exam, there came a point where there were like sub questions and a lot of questions where I felt like we're gonna take a lot of time for me to do. And I continued to do whatever I could do because also timing is a huge factor. You have a lot of questions in a short period of time, and also sometimes those questions they need you to go back to case studies and see stuff. So I went and wrote down whatever I could in terms of what I thought was doable. Not that I knew all the stuff, and left questions that I felt like I needed more time to answer. And for me, most of those questions were the Excel ones. So that's, I think, the biggest mistake that I've also done. Is a lot of people say, oh, with these exams you can't really practice, because they try to make the exam so different from past exams that you won't learn from doing past exams or questions. But then I went through maybe 2 exams before writing, and I think some of them were helpful in terms of like just getting an idea of how people answer questions, and also how people apply certain formulas in Excel. If you don't have a lot of exposure in Excel, it's gonna be very hard passing fellowship exams. And like, especially with like if you have metrics calculations and some other, like, it's just more convenient and more efficient to apply certain formulas than kind of trying to do things manually in Excel. So you need that exposure, and you also need to think on your feet. If I have this problem, what should I do, and most importantly, what's the easiest way to get there? Basically, long story short, there were a couple of questions I left in the exam because I left them for last minute, and I genuinely didn't know how to do them. And I think the biggest thing was I didn't know how to apply those things in Excel, because I read them theoretically and not like practically, and didn't expect them to come in like a practical form. I don't know if that makes sense. But I left, I think it was almost 10 marks, hey, worth of questions. And the time went by, and I'm like, I cannot do this. I tried to do what I can. And so I've gotten advice that just try to write down something. So I think when I had like 10 minutes left, I went through these questions that I was leaving behind, and I was just trying to see which ones I can try to answer. It didn't matter what I was writing, just try which ones I can answer, maybe try to make sense out of something, you know. And that's what I did. But at the end of the day, I still left a lot of questions I couldn't answer. And I left the exam, was like, there's a very high chance I'm not gonna pass. But God does miracles. I've heard people write fellowship exams where they're like, oh, they left questions and they still passed. I've heard people who say they left the exam feeling so good and they failed. So I didn't know what to expect, but I had a lot of faith in God that if something good comes out of this exam, I really attribute all of this to God's glory and grace, because this exam was not it at all. I remember like telling myself, even at some point when I went to Namibia, I forgot about it, that I'm supposed to be even getting results for this exam. And then fast forward, the day I came from Namibia is actually the day results came out. So what they do is on that Friday, they release passing candidate numbers, and then the following Monday you get your official grade from the exam. And so I arrived in the morning, the results were not yet out. I went to the house and I prayed to God again, like, you know, I'm okay with the results. Give me the strength to accept whatever the results are. But also just, God, you know, I want to pass this exam on my first attempt and just move on. You know, I have big goals of finishing this exam journey. And the passing candidate numbers came out. I remember clicking the moment they came. I remember clicking on the file, and you have to search to see if you're passing. And before I even searched, I saw this list. It only has around, I don't even know the number, but it's barely a page. That means out of all the people who wrote this exam around the world, these are the only people that passed. The passing candidate numbers were, it was barely a page. I'm used to like essay exams being even 2-3 pages of candidate numbers. It was barely a page. And I remember I first panicked because I was looking for my number. I couldn't see it. But I think it's because I was looking in the wrong direction. My number was 4 digits and I was looking in like 5 digits. I couldn't see my number. But then I kept looking and I saw my candidate. But I screamed. Guys, I said, God, this is you. It's not me. I don't know what I did in that exam. I know that I'm not worthy of getting the credit for it. Maybe I feel like I went through so much in my studying, but I also know it's not unique to me because a lot of people do work hard for these fellowship exams. So people did work hard for this exam. Sometimes we pass, sometimes we don't pass. So it's not unique that I worked hard for this exam, but maybe I did work hard. But I also know that this credit, it can only be for God. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it, guys. This is the first exam. Yeah, I would say it's the first exam where I was really okay if things don't work out, but also I was like, it's not possible that, yeah, yeah. But I screamed, I almost cried, and I remember just feeling a sense of like a burden released off me, and sometimes we also don't process our achievements. We want to go on to what's next. I started thinking about what exam am I gonna take next, because you don't have time to waste. You need months to study for these exams, and right now there's only around like 3 months to the next sitting. So I started thinking about my next exam, and I started stressing because I wasn't ready to start studying for a new exam. I don't know what I was thinking, but my mind wasn't fully wrapped around the fact that I don't have to repeat this exam. Also, to be quite honest, this exam that I took, a lot of people do say it's one of the hardest to pass in the track that I've chosen. But also, it's kind of an exam where a lot of people take as the first for this track. Maybe it's one of those where you just want to get it done and over with, the first kind of tough exam. I mean, all of them are hard, but this particular one, for some reason, apparently it's hard to pass. I don't know if it's necessarily hard, but it's hard to pass. Right now, I'm preparing for my second exam, praying for favor and grace in this exam as well. But yeah, thank you guys for coming to this channel. As always, appreciate having a conversation with you regarding my experiences, and maybe sharing some of those with people that might be going through a similar experience or journey, and we can share insight. But yeah, I'll see you again next time, and see you.